Hey everybody, today on Tales from Behind the DM Screen, I tell you a story of one epic player character death.
He's gonna die! He's gonna fight me! He's a big fighter! He thinks he's awesome!
Alright, so before I dive in, I'm just going to get rid of this because I want to be able to talk to you. I've seen lots of videos about people telling their D&D stories, and some of them are fantastic. Some of them are just like really well done as far as the animation they use. Man, I wish I could animate. I wouldn't have time to do it, but let's be honest, I wish I could, like, you know, maybe I could draw out really stick figures and hold up stories or something, but probably not. Anyway. But whenever I've watched hey, this is what was cool when we had this one session this one time, I've always had this feeling of like, that just seems to work out so perfectly the way you want it to make this story kind of exactly what you want it to be. And so it just, for me, it just ends up feeling like, alright, well, yeah, I'm just reading a book. This didn't really happen at a table. And also they seem kind of braggadocio at times, and also just a little self-serving, self-aggrandizing, if you will. And that being said, I'm about to dive in myself to tell a story that happened at my table just a couple weeks ago. And yes, this will come across as braggadocio and self-aggrandizing and all those, so bear with me. This was just way too epic of a moment at my gaming table. This is more for me when I've got 7 marbles rolling around in my head and I want to look back at playing D&D. I'm going to want to remember this story. So, a little bit of background here. My group is currently playing Dungeon Crawl Classics. It is a very OSR heavy game. One of the nice things about Dungeon Crawl Classics is that it just gives a very loose framework of rules, and then it just says, for any kind of specific questions, it says things along the lines of, that's a really good question for your dungeon master to answer. And so whenever we've come up with a rules question, which isn't often, whenever we've come up with a rules question, we've, as a group, looked at it and said, this seems like what should work. And we've created a living set of rules, like just, and we update a Google document with those information. So we always just have that handy. I'm a big fan of the system. It uses lots of crazy dice that you can buy, either the official ones like this or knockoffs, like they use D5s and D7s and you know, just D30s, D16s, things like that, that make the game kind of neat and cool, that you use these cool different dice. They don't use them all that often, but it is just often enough that it's cool. And it also, it just kind of, it really kind of feels like I'm playing BX D&D, which was, you know, basic expert D&D. It kind of feels like that, which is what I'm playing with my son. When we play one-on-one, BDM, him as the player, we play BX D&D, and but it also, like, it removes even more rules, if you will. Also, it's very kind to players. Clerics are able to basically lay on hands and try to heal as much as they want. You know, the wizards are able to cast as many spells as they want. The crux there is that when you cast spells, either whether divine or arcane, there's a die roll that's involved where you have to you know, roll a die and then, you know, succeed at a difficulty class to make that spell happen. And what's really cool is that depending upon how well you do at those spells, there's a varied effects. And like most of this giant book, if you've never bought this, and you can pick this up cheap off of Amazon, it's worth owning just to read. There is, like, here's like this spell called Glorious Mire. You can't really see it, but this is all the spell description because of the fact that because of all the different possibilities of the events that can happen, like it's depending upon how well you roll when you roll to cast a spell, or how poor you roll for that matter. There's a varied effects, and so it's kind of neat how mercurial the magic is. It isn't just, yeah, I cast Magic Missile and I do, you know, d4 plus 1 points of damage. It is, oh, I cast Magic Missile and I create one giant meteor-sized missile and hurl it through the chest of the demon that I'm fighting. Or I, you know, get, you know, 7 little tiny missiles that do 1 point of damage each. You know, so it's kind of neat how those things work, and I'd suggest checking it out. We are playing a game in kind of a homebrew world that I've created, and the adventures are kind of on the run. They are exiles from their home village because they discovered the people that are running the village were, you know, probably not really all that good of people, but they had to, you know, run because they discovered that. That was our first adventure. And they headed off to the uncharted wilderness into the west, and they came across this small village called Eastdale, which they now are using as their base of operations, and they're just rushing out into the wilderness, and like they've discovered a series, a canyon basically, which has a series of different caves and caverns and dungeons within it. And this is very, very loosely based upon this. All right. So this is the Forbidden Caverns of Archaea. This is a mega dungeon it's an award-winning mega dungeon that has that is made for Labyrinth Lord, but Labyrinth Lord is a very like another OSR clone, so it's easily transferable over to this system that I'm running, as I said before, Dungeon Crawl Classics. I am heavily modifying Archaea, mostly just using the maps and the themes of some of the places that they go to, and then inserting my own monsters, inserting my own traps, treasures, things like that. I used to love making maps, now I just don't have time. And I tend to think that, like, whenever I make a map, I usually tend to make it too ornate, right? And like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if there's all these rooms and all this stuff? And I always end up doing that, and I had to learn less is more. And there's a lot of really fantastic maps in this book, that some of them are definitely ornate, have a lot of stuff going on, but there's definitely a lot of less is more types locations there. All right. So, all of that being said, Dungeon Crawl Classics can be very brutal to PCs. When you fall to 0 hit points, you just fall to 0 hit points, and you basically have the number of rounds equal to your level to stay alive, and you've got to get healing in some way. And if you don't have a cleric or somebody with a handy healing potion, you're probably gone and done. I'm looking through here, and I mentioned, like, always have, I've said this in many of my things, have a notebook. So this is my notebook for my campaign right now. It was a notebook for, like, my previous 2 campaigns. I'm almost running out of pages. This is just a, just a steno book. That's all it is. And I'm looking on here, and my friend Brad started with a halfling warrior named Vex, who was murdered by a tribe of zombies and eaten, and then raised from the dead, and now haunts a dungeon that people have sworn they'll go back and save him or end his suffering, but they haven't gone back yet. He was then replaced with a cleric, a priest that worshipped Crom, a dwarf cleric by the name of Soltaire, and, well, we're going to be talking about Soltaire today. So, we had a session, as I said, a couple of weeks ago, and I apologize for all of that preamble. If you made it this far and you're, like, wondering where's the story, I probably should have just dove in, but I wanted to get, you know me. I can't be quick about this stuff. So, the party had gone to several small caves and they had discovered like a cave that had some giant insects in it, which was good because there is a priest in the priest in Eastdale who worships a god known as Saint Ig, who can use like bug ichor to create healing potions and healing salves. And so they spent a lot of time there killing these giant insects and hauling these dead bodies, or squeezing out the bug juice, as they said, into these like wineskins and what have you. So he would create healing potions for them, and they ran around in there. They went to the aforementioned spot where they ran into the undead, which ended up killing, I think, 2 or 3 members of the party. This is a 5-person party. Yeah, it was 3 of the 5 were killed by the undead. And I laughed just because I shouldn't laugh, but that was pretty cool too, but not nearly as cool as the one I'm going to tell you here. Oh, and I should mention, in Dungeon Crawl Classics, you level up very slow. We are on our 5th session, and not everybody is 2nd level yet. So people are like, it is still very precarious, and people are like taking their time and being very safe, which is cool. I like that. However, they discussed, they were like, they were running out of money, basically. Bugs don't tend to have a lot of gold. They ended up running away from the undead and didn't really get much treasure out of that one. But they went into this small cave that was like mostly abandoned. But they ran into this small group of these small lizard-like humanoids, kobolds, that were easily dispatched by them. They took care of them quite quickly. And then when they left the cave, they followed the tracks that these little lizards left behind. And they tracked them back to this other cave. And outside of this cave, there was this large bestial humanoid, with an axe and armor and what have you. But he had been punctured by like 7 javelins, and his dead body, a dead, putrefying body, was outside this cave. And the javelins were about the same size as the ones that had been used in the battle they had with, I'm just going to call them kobolds, used against the kobolds earlier. So they surmised, okay, this is where the kobolds live. They're a little bit beaten up. They said, let's come back to this spot next time. We handled those kobolds pretty easily. Let's go back to town, rest up. We have a little bit of treasure. We can pay for a night at the inn. Let's go ahead and just, and also we have more bug juice to give to the clerics so we can get some more potions. And then we'll come back here and we'll see what we can find out. Now notice there's no overlying plot at this point. Nobody has said, there's no oh, we need to, because these kobolds are planning to attack the town, or there's no thread that they're following. This is just classic D&D of we need money. These things probably have money. They're out here in the wilderness, and we might as well just go ahead and murder Hobo. Now, a couple of the players are lawful, and they worship, good deities. So, they see it as their duty to cleanse the land of evil. And so, and I'm not going to get into a big giant discussion of, well, what is evil or anything like that. So they feel like they should go back and do it. But like I said, they're being very cautious. In most campaigns that you run with players with, dozens of hit points at first level and so forth, would probably have just gone in that cave to begin with. But my group was like, let's just relax. Let's head back. And they did. They took a nap. Ate some warm food, replaced. I think some people had like broken weapons and stuff, because Dungeon Crawl Classics has both a like a critical hit tables and critical fumble tables. So there was some stuff they needed to repair. They restocked. They went back to the canyon, went up to the cave early in the morning, and they went in. So one of the first things they noticed when they went in was that there was a long tunnel, and it was well carved. And that's one of the things they've discovered, is that some of the caves in this canyon are caves, and some of the caves are like ancient ruins of some strange, like they're called the Forbidden Caverns of Archaea, because there is this ancient race called the Archaeans that used to live here, like in how many like millennia ago, what have you. So they and they've been tasked actually also by there's a wizard that lives in Eastdale who is researching the Archaeans, and he pays good money for artifacts from Archaea. So that's another thing too. They're like, okay, this is Archaean ruins. There's a good chance we're gonna find some Archaean artifacts. We're gonna get a lot of gold when we head back. So they head in and they notice it's Archaean ruins. They're excited, and they notice there's this tunnel that leads down this hall, and it ends in a set of double doors. And they look at it and they're like, because, and they said this doesn't look good, because one, it's too easy, it's too obvious, but two, they notice that at the end of the hallway, there is a huge, right in front of the doors, in the ceiling, there's this huge, like, basically gap that looks like a perfect place for somebody to, like, throw boiling oil or something down on people that walk forward. So they're like, yeah, we're not going to go there. That's not going to happen. So they decided to kind of just take a look around, and one of the things about it was that the dwarves in the party, there's two dwarves in the party, a dwarven wizard by the name of Gonlex, and the aforementioned Soltar. And they noticed on either side of the corridor there was a secret door, like a stonework secret door. And so they, the whole dwarves notice shifting stone passageways, things like that. So they easily opened them both up, and they both opened up into little 10-foot rooms. And they are both on either side of them, so they can go left or right. And so what happened is that Gonlex, the wizard, he went into the one to the west to go and see what it is, and a trap door opened up underneath him, and he fell down. And this is a trap that the kobolds have set up. Basically, they make those secret doors very easy to find, so people will take them, they'll fall on a trap door, and the trap door leads right into basically a cell. There's bars, there's no way to get out, you can't climb out because the walls are smooth, and what have you. And when that happens, the noise alerts these kobolds that come running up and like basically either like stab the person with spears through the bars, or they do whatever they have to do. And so here come running these kobolds. After they do it, everybody else jumps down into the pit to help him. They managed to I think they killed two of them, and the kobold ran away. And then they were like, and then as they were there, of course, the time passed and the trapdoor closed. So now the party is effectively trapped in the dungeon, which was pretty sweet, I gotta tell you. But they were still like, these kobolds are easy. They're basically dropping with one hit, because they don't have a lot of hit points. So they, the thief of the party, who is a Gunder, who is a halfling thief, move forward and pick the lock on the cell easily, and then open the door. And so they began spelunking the area. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but here's the big deal: is that the one kobold who ran away alerted the other kobolds they had intruders, and so they didn't have a lot of time. And one of the things that happened is they actually went directly to one of the tougher encounters in the dungeon. There is a thread that's going on, so if you're playing in my group, don't. I guess you probably figured this out already, but they've run into and they've been dealing with this weird cult. They don't really know much about it. They don't know, other than the fact that there is a great number of these cultists, human mostly, rolling around. They wear these mottled orange robes, and they are yeah, he likes to play with dice. They're thoroughly evil. And they actually ran into like probably one of the tougher boss fights in the get out of here. Just one of the tougher boss fights in the thing, and they like a third or fourth level fighter who is all by himself, like basically just hanging out in his room, and they managed to, with a critical hit, a critical spell cast, and like miraculous, they basically killed the guy in like one round, which cool, awesome. I mean, I thought that was like super cool. Like, this guy would have easily killed like one or two of the members of the party if they had fought him straight up, but because he like lost initiative and they went boom 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 boom, it was done. Right, there was a backstab, a critical hit, a critical spell cast, game over. But he had minions, and there was a big long battle, and they got really beaten up, but they managed to clear out this little temple, this little cult temple that's in this level of the dungeon. And they realized more kobolds were coming. The noise, the alarm, everything else. And the wizard, Gonlix, has a spell called Ward Portal, which is, you know, and the one thing you'll find with Dungeon Crawl Classics is there are, like, basically all the classic spells are in this, and they are referenced in different things. So instead of Wizard Lock, it's called Ward Portal. And so the one entrance to the area they're in, he cast Ward Portal, and he rolled so well on his spell that he made it so the door functionally vanished. It went so well that the door literally disappeared. It no longer existed. Like, not even for him, not even for the party. So now they're doubly trapped in the area. I should mention that like they did miss like several secret doors that would have led them out of the dungeon at this point. But even with an elf in the party, which, you know, can detect them, they just never searched the right wall. The elf, when I was rolling for the elf, I never rolled well enough for them to detect the secret doors. So it was definitely one of those things where a lot of things were working out for them, but a lot of things weren't working out for them. They eventually found a way through some rubble to head north out of the like area, the where the like it was actually like the ruins, and they actually made it into some underground caverns. And you've probably played in some D&D things where like there's the cavern that like you bust down a wall and all of a sudden there's this wild area. And they got into this wild area and they were like, oh, thank goodness, you know, we can kind of put this rubble back up behind us, the kobolds can't find us, we'll be okay. And they started like searching around, and immediately they realized this was a bad idea because yeah, it was kind of it wasn't kobolds they were dealing with, but what they were dealing with, everything was way more difficult. They found some ancient ruins in this chasm, and they saw this magical like altar that they wanted to reach to, but they couldn't get to it because there was this like basically 20-foot chasm between them and the other side. They tried to come up with ways to get there, but they couldn't. They went through a room that was radiating with magic, and these like basically mud golems appeared and nearly killed a couple of members by suffocating them, with, you know, covering their face with mud, and they managed to save the players there when that almost happened. And they basically started running for their lives. they were running out of hit points. One of the things about being a wizard and in this game is that when you finally fail, you can cast your spells over and over again. If you have, I have flaming hands, you can cast flaming hands over and over and over again. But the moment you fail casting a spell, you can no longer cast that spell for the rest of the day. So one by one, the spells that the wizard Gonlix was able to use were vanishing because he wasn't able to cast these spells anymore. Priests get spells, and they works the same way when they try to cast a spell. If they fail, they don't fail at, like, they can still try to cast a spell again. And remember, laying on hands isn't a spell. Like, you can try to heal as many times as you want every single day. The problem is that when you fail at laying on hands or casting a spell, you start to anger your deity, and you have, like, basically you start off as a 1, and the first time you fail at something, it goes up by 1, and so it's 1 to 2, and then 1 to 3, and then 1 to 4, and so on and so forth. And when you do, and you roll within that parameter of the die, you have angered your deity, and something bad happens to the cleric. And so it is like a cascading effect, obviously. And once you rest, that resets itself back to 1. And so these two clerics were slowly, their threshold of angering their gods was growing and growing and growing while they're keeping the party alive. Plus, there is some, like, actual attribute loss. If you get knocked down in combat and you are healed and brought back, you lose some attributes that is healed through rest as well, because there is something bad that happens to you. If you are basically almost slain but saved, you lose some attributes. And the thing is that it should mention that attributes don't matter too much in Dungeon Crawl Classics. Most from 3.0 D&D on, and Pathfinder, attributes are very, very important. It's like, because they're very stat based, and I'm not here to debate whether or not that's good or bad. But in this, even if somehow you get an 18 in this, you have a +3, and then like a 16 and 17 is +2, and then a 13 through 15 is +1, and then the negatives, obviously, after 9, anyway, so go down as well. My point in saying this is that your losing attributes isn't that big of a deal. I had a 14, agility, which is what they use here instead of dexterity. Oh, and I've lost 4 points of that because I was knocked down. Oh, I lost a +1. It's ultimately not that debilitating. So, but obviously, if any of your attributes reach 0, you die. So, all of that being said, they come across this large fungus cavern. It has some bioluminescence going on, lots of tall mushrooms and what have you. And they're like, okay, well, we should probably maybe inspect that, but we need to rest. What they didn't realize is that basically that giant mushroom place has hundreds of giant insects living in it. So they camped right outside of it, and every time they tried to go to sleep, they would have these things would come roaring out, like giant centipedes and giant cockroaches and these giant mosquitoes and what have you. And so they weren't able to actually get any rest. They were trying to, but they weren't able to pull it off. After multiple combats, they finally realized this is a dumb place to sleep. So let's go down this other passageway and find another place to rest. So they went and they went down this other passageway, and one of the players, the thief, heard like something, like a very deep, heavy breathing coming from a passageway down. And so everybody immediately like just stopped, and they were just like, and this is where the epic death comes up. So the thief said, "I'll sneak ahead. And I'll try to figure out what's going on." And so he snuck down. That was Gundar, the thief. He snuck down the passageway. And I should mention there's Ophius is the elf, and Warren is the other priest. And so Gundar snuck down the passageway, and then he entered into this room there was this large nest, and there's this something huge sleeping in this nest. And so he creeps back, and he says, I don't know what we're gonna do. And so we got this to right here, and we got these giant insects over here. What's the plan? And so the party decided, let's just camp right here in the middle of this stuff. And we're going to try to rest, and we're trying to just get through the night, and it'll be okay. So they started to sleep, and I was rolling to see if anything would come and notice them. And at some point in the middle of the night, Gundar heard whatever it was move, and immediately he woke everybody up, and everybody was like, where is it moving to? But it didn't move towards them. It actually moved to the south and moved away from them. So Gundar once again said, I'm going to sneak over there and see what's going on. So he sneaks over, and he goes and he peers in the nest. And I told him in the nest, it's like with your dark vision, you can barely see, like, there's all kinds of coins and stuff in the nest, like all these like pretty little things. And he's like, okay, fine. And he's like, do I hear this monster? And no, you don't. So he creeps, and he's like, so he sees a passageway out of that cavern to the south. So he goes to the south, and he creeps after them. And he finally comes into a room where, after all these twisting, turning passageways and whatever, he comes into a room where there are several dead kobolds that are currently being feasted on by a giant, well, I mean, and if you know what D&D is, a hook horror. And I've altered the hook horror a little bit. I made it so it uses echolocation to find. It's nearly sightless. You can see that the eyes are like white, milky white, like almost, pretty much can't see. But it uses, like, as I said, echolocation, just like clicking noises to bounce out the walls to kind of sense where things are. And and so he's watching this thing, like, pick up these things with these hooks and just eating them one after another with this giant beak. And so he says, okay, well, I'm going to sneak back. And the most important roll he had to sneak back, he rolls poorly. And he basically fails his sneak. Also, the fact that the hook horror relies on hearing, he had to roll really well. He didn't. And it, like, hears him. And basically, and then he just runs, and he takes off running. And so as he's tearing down these passageways, and this giant hook horror is like, like this, and then the party hears this clicking noise, like resounding off the walls and everything like that. And they're like, what's going on? What's going on? So and of course, the party did something beautiful and wonderful. When they split up, to the Warren and who was it? It was Warren. I can't remember. Two of them ran off in one direction, and they actually headed towards the place where they actually had fought those mud golems, and they headed off in that direction. The others, tried to, they were like, if we can just get by the creature, we'll be fine. Like, because we can run, and if we can make it, and we can run down to where those kobolds were, obviously that leads to an exit, because the kobolds got in there, they got to get out. So they're making logical choices, but they're up against something that they're not prepared to fight. And so, I had a big roll to decide which way the hook horror was going to chase. Was he going to chase them, the people that are heading towards the mud golems, or was he going to chase the three people that were heading the other way? And I rolled, and everybody kind of held their breath, and we watched the die, and then so it came up like 1 to 3, 4 to 6, and it came up 4 to 6. So it was going to chase after, Ophius the elf. It was going to chase after Gonlex the wizard, and Soltaire the dwarf cleric, dwarf priest of Crom. And so. And notice they haven't even tried to hit it yet. They're like, if we stand and fight against this thing, it's going to rip us apart. We're not going to fight. And I should mention that my son comes down every once in a while and watches us play. He gets really jazzed, and sometimes I let him roll the dice. I was like, here, roll the dice for this thing. And he really enjoys it. And he has 2-player character kills to his credit as being my official dice roller. So, here comes the epic death. So... The party, the 3 of them, are running. And the dwarves realize it's faster than us. It's just they're trying to run. And Ophius is gone. He is just like, he's like, and not that he isn't brave or anything like that, because he's just like, he's gone. And so, and then the fact is that, Gonlex and Soltaire were from the same dwarf tribe, and so my friend Brad told, he tells Gonlex and Ophius, who's already running away, go, I got this. And he turns around, he takes out his warhammer, and this rampaging creature is coming up on him. And inside this book, there are rules for a priest to call upon divine aid. Basically, begging their god to step in and do what's right and save them. Like, basically, take an active interest right then, right there, and decide whether or not to save their devout follower. And so, basically, you basically burn your entire chance to cast any spells, to pray for any healing, or anything else for the rest of the day. I think it adds like a +10 or a +15 to your threshold check as to whether or not something bad happens to you if you ask your god for help. But if you can roll well enough, you can ask for tons of different things. And one of the things you can ask for is just, I need like divine fire to come down and destroy this thing that I'm fighting. And so he basically, he says, I turn around and I stand there with my shield and my warhammer in my hands. And he says, Crom, just right out of Conan, Crom, I am devout. I worship you even when you give me nothing. He's like, as this thing's like shrieking, clicking noises, going crazy. He can smell the blood on this thing, running forward, getting ready to like rip him apart. He says, it's like, I beseech thee, deliver me from this abomination. And he takes out his 20-sided die, and we all just kind of stopped and watched, and we watched it roll into this little dice tray right here, and watch it boom, boom, boom. A 1. You gotta roll high, obviously. So, basically, his god, like, turned off the connection between him and him. Basically, his god just turned his back on him right as the hook core came up on top of him. And my son takes these two 20-sided dice with the 2 hooks, the attacks, right? And he rolls them. And he gets a 20, a critical hit, and an 18. And, like, the critical hit was, like, add 3d8 to the damage. So he ended up taking something like, 48 points of damage. He was first level. I think he had a maximum of 9 hit points. I just ruled that, like, he begged for this. And then they came right up on top of him, and he realized nothing happened. And he feels the connection to his god just basically like a light switch. Click, turn it off. And then these 2 large hooks come down and just eviscerate him. And I said, like 30 feet away, the dwarf and Onophius felt the blood from the body splash them on their backs. and they took off running. And I said that was the end of the session. We just ended the session right then and there. And honestly, everybody at the table cheered and clapped. We were all just doubled over in laughter. My son was just giggling. It was an absolute epic moment at the table. And to his credit, Brad loved it. He laughed probably harder than any of us. And yeah, and so next session he just made another character. He made a wizard named Elabon, who now has joined the party and is attempting to spelunk the depths. And the party, the next session, they did escape. They managed to escape. It's kind of almost boring in comparison, but they managed to escape from the Kobold Caves, and they are making plans after they got back to Eastdale to head back in and avenge the death of their stalwart companion. But there you go. That's my story. If you have cool stories about character deaths, that your character lived and died and what have you, or you were DMing a group and that happened, love to hear it. I'd love for you to share that with us. Put it in the comments below. And as always, just hit the old subscribe button and what have you. I apologize, it's taken a while to get another one of these out. I just haven't had the time to do it. But I'll try to get another one out this week as well. I got a couple of topics I wanted to talk about as far as gaming in general. And hopefully I'll get that done before Friday. But take care of yourself. Be good to yourself. And be good to the people you love and you care about. And like I said, be nice to strangers as well. It can never hurt to have a little karma out there in the wilderness. I know Solitaire probably would have liked a little more karma. Anyway, until next time, I'm the Undead Viking. Take care.